Welcome everybody to the session where I'm going to talk about the 3 dimensions of law. Usually, when we think about law, we think about the law book. There are lots of black letters in a book and one should read loads of them in order to know what law is. But then there are others who think that law is not law if it's not implemented in reality. Law must be put into action. And then who are actually the actors? Do we need the heroes to put everything right and bring justice to the world? Or who is it that we will rely on Right, so maybe some kind of that kind of heroism is might be needed, but usually when we talk about putting law in action, we have the understanding of someone who knows the law and who can put things right. And here we have the Greek goddess of justice, Themis, who is putting everything right. The name means putting everything right. But she has the sword with which she resolves the conflict of the disputing parties. And she's altogether blinded, so that she should be neutral in regard to the parties and really don't be biased in any way. But as we saw, also her backside, there might be other dimensions in the law than just the sword that resolves the conflict. And that's what I'm arguing here today, that law consists of 3 dimensions: moral, formal, and constructive. It means that law, those enacted laws in the book, must also be just and equitable, at the same time that they give us legal security. We know what is stipulated and we can act accordingly, and there's predictability in law. We go first take a little excursion in the history of law. In the old times, any conflicts usually led to feuds, violence, wars, and people in antiquity, they believed that the gods would come and intervene and resolve the conflicts of the mortals. Here's Jupiter illustrated. Or one relied on the elders of the community who mediated. This is a Celtic figure having a kind of ceremonial golden equipment. They exist from many parts of Europe, but this one is on display in Neues Museum Berlin, so if you ever go there, the golden hat that the druid of the Celtic druid had when performing his tasks in the community. It's a really handsome item actually in the museum, I think. Then comes a little bit more law. When the Romans Romans created their empire. They really did not obey any laws, it was just brute force method to create the Roman Empire. But what was the result of this was Pax Romana, a long, long period of peace, when they created very sophisticated legal principles. So that Cicero was quite right when he said that peace, that law requires peace, and when there's war, those laws are silent. So that's the first prerequisite. But the Roman law, the Roman lawyers created principles and so on. They were the basis for all European law ever after. We go further on to the 12th century, about 1100s, when the theologians, the Catholic Church lawyers, they reinvented all the Roman law principles together with theological principles. They put them into a logical system, and learned law, the law of learned lawyers, scholars, started to be evolving at the same time then when there was also secular law. But this, interestingly, this moral dimension of justice and equity did not disappear with the learned law, but it was sort of intertwined with the Roman law principles. The household name of Catholic Church even today is Thomas of Aquinas, who brought the ideas of Aristotle back to the European scene, and he thought that the truth of moral principles, legal principles about the whole world, they just exist already, and human beings just find out what they are. They have a moral capacity to find out what they are, but they are not supposed to think themselves so much. When the modern states were being created, about 1500s all over Europe, like the state of Sweden, when Gustav Vasa became king, the Swedish reformator Olaus Petri wrote down these so-called domarreglerna, the instructions for the church, and one of the most famous maxims or statements is this, what is neither just or equitable cannot be law, and he was a fierce critic of Gustav Vasa as well, because Gustav Vasa did not follow these principles very carefully. But in order to be legitimate, so that people would believe in what the sovereign ruler gave as law, it also had to feel the expectation of justice what people had. And this was Olaus Petri's legacy for the mankind. Well, these guys then are examples as Kant during his circles in Königsberg. Preceded the understanding of law what we have today, the modern law, the formal positive law. The enlightened thought signified a distance from this Thomist pre-modern thinking that you just find the truth as it exists somewhere that God has given. David Hume is famous for his guillotine, which means that what exists really does not give any ground for prescriptive statements. So what is that doesn't necessarily have to be so. And Immanuel Kant had an idea that people possessed the pure moral reason that they could do these moral judgments themselves. You know this maxim, act only according to that maxim whereby you can, at the same time, will that it should be a universal law. There is some kind of universalism even, that people can assess themselves what should be just an equitable behavior, and act so that even others would think that this is the right way to do. So that law takes distance from morals during the Enlightenment. And now we come to the flat law again, the black letters. It looks very boring after all these actors so far. Modern states evolved, understanding of democracy. People must enact their own laws in nation states. It's a democratic process. Law no longer relies on morals or religion. Individuals have right to privacy. They can assess moral principles themselves. It's not the law's task to say what is moral behavior. And above all, predictability is the thing. So if you break your contract, you know that you will be paying some damages to the other party. So this was sort of the thing to introduce in a modern nation state and market economy. So instead of the old static world law comes a dynamic dimension, and law adapts to that. But it becomes rather narrow concept of law. In the Nordic countries especially, there's also an understanding that law should have effects on the society. It would change things, so-called social engineering, that we are putting things right in another way, not only dispute resolution, but also a good life for everybody. So that law would be a tool, a mechanism for social change and also material things. But all this was done without any moral dimensions. It was more like a question of social planning. But has the moral dimension disappeared when we look at law today? We have the human rights as they are written down in international laws conventions, and they form the overall meta law these days, that all national enacted laws also should be in accordance with human rights, the fundamental rights of individuals. And there's an expectation of justice, definitely, even today. So we are not just interested in the predictability part of law, but we also think that there must be some justice here in the world. And definitely it's not the Justice League that is bringing that to the world. Third dimension, the constructivist nature, has become more and more important to realize that law actually is not so neutral as it claims to be. Usually it reflects certain values, certain lifestyles, certain types of persons, their relations. At the same time, it constructs these persons and their relations, what they look like. So there's a common critique that the law's person, they are able-bodied, heterosexual, middle-class males often, whereas some other people are invisible in the law. Law doesn't really take into account them, and that can lead to marginalization and discrimination. But now we take a little example. There's a cover of my latest book, Alternative to Marriage. And marriage is a very good case showing these dimensions. The moral dimension, we expect that the enacted laws should support such values as loyalty, commitment. There's the formal dimension. We must know when we marry what the consequences are for each party's life, their property and things, and how we can dissolve marriage if we want to. So this is the formal part. Thirdly, constructivist dimension. The rules of marriage very much shape our understandings of gender, sexuality and care. And it's not irrelevant what it says in the marital law. Even if it doesn't say it overtly, it never tells it explicitly, but it exists definitely. And we see it when there are debates of same-sex marriage and so on. As a conclusion, I would like to say that the current positivist formal notion of law is definitely too narrow, and that we would take into account the deep historical layers, sort of several structures within the law that are intertwined, especially these days when there's a pluralism of lifestyles, religions, values. There are no longer any homogeneous cultures or moral systems. So we really must think about it. I'm not saying that it's always easy. Sometimes it can be problematic too. If the majority has values that discriminate against the minorities, that can be a problem if we allow morals to take a far too strong a part here, but definitely this linkage is important to be analyzed. So legal scholars are the ones to do that, absolutely. So what can the legal science offer? The one dimension law in books, law in action, the 3 dimensions, or so there's a bit of Ragnarök Götterdämmer here. But it can also be a beginning of a new era. When we destroy the old, there can be something new growing up. Thank you.